All right. So moving on to preparing your property. Just as important as the documentation and the paperwork and the receipts and maintenance, keeping the photographic evidence of the property is just as important. So Derek touched on it a little bit earlier, but we're talking about photo and video documentation of your property prior to any type of potential damage or major event. So what that means is, taking photos periodically throughout the year. If you upgrade a clubhouse or you update if you manage or own a hotel, if you update the rec area or whatever it is, then obtain documentation of what that looks like prior to any kind of storm. That way, you're covered on assets and all of your different type of equipment and miscellaneous type things that are inside your residence or your business. So,
And Travis, that just came up today with us. We had a question about a roofing piece from 2017. Remember, we had documented it, and they asked for that. They asked if we still have those pictures, and we still have the pictures from 2017.
Yeah, and those things, it ends up being a huge asset. So, and Derek mentioned again too, keep copies in remote and secured locations. So it would be great to get all of your documentation together and all of your photographic documentation and all your records together. But unfortunately, a lot of people just keep them stored in their place of business or their place of residence that is also affected by the storm. So if you have a major event and your business or your residence floods and all of your documentation is in there, then everything you did was for naught. So you need to make sure that, like Derek said, in a cloud, keep that in a remote location, a secured, storm and fire safe box, along with maybe a family member or a business associate that's out of state. A copy online or a physical copy with somebody that's out of the area will assist. I know many people that have been around dealing with these storms since the 80s, back before we had all the digital technology. A lot of insurance companies would tell you back then to document with a VHS recorder and walk through your home and then mail a copy of that VHS tape to your friends and family out of state. So it's still a good idea, and that same application still applies. Just with the digital formats in the cloud, we have a little bit easier access to do so. So in conjunction with that documentation, you want to take a physical inventory of what you got. And we mentioned that a little bit briefly, but summarize your clubhouse, pool, tennis courts, equipment records. If you do, you should include the brand and the model, the serial number, the date it was purchased, as well as receipts, drawings, schematics, photos. If you had something redone, like you did have at your business, you had an addition put on, or at your residential location had an addition put on, keep the blueprints and the plans and the receipts and the invoices. All of those things will help. Keep a record and map a location of cutoff valves and switches, especially for things like water, gas, electric, sprinklers, and alarms. And record anything that is going to require a key code or a combination lock access. So you've got that way to disseminate that to somebody else that's out of the area if need be, or to somebody outside of your organization if need be. Other considerations that we briefly mentioned earlier are special IDs and placards for volunteers or authorized decision makers, dead tree and limb risks to power lines, street access, buildings, and vehicles. We talked a little bit about that, but a lot of times the collateral damage and a lot of the major damage is caused by flying debris or tree limbs or down trees. And those risks can occur for hours or even days after the storm because they've been damaged, and then a tree will end up falling 3 days later. We've seen that happen before. So those are the kind of things to think about when you're working on your preparation. And then vendors and contractors. So pre-qualify them, no matter who your general contractor is. Beware of the risks of subcontractors with unskilled labor, without insurance, without licensure. The insurance may not cover if procedures are not followed. And especially in a state like Florida, where there's such stringent requirements for general contractors and roofers and tradesmen, we find, unfortunately, that in this industry, when you are dealing with a catastrophe or a major event like this, that people come out of the woodworks and they come from out of the area. And look, Derek and I've got several properties we got involved with that prior to our involvement, we found out that they were paying $30,000 and $40,000 for a guy in a truck to come tarp the building because it was leaking and he just happened to be there. Again, if they're not licensed and there's price gouging involved, there's no guarantee that the insurance will help recover those emergency services. So one of the things that's important is to know who you're working with, and somebody that understands how to handle this type of work. So
And Travis, think of the horror stories too that we've heard about people signing up. People just stop by to do cleanup or emergency service work. They weren't licensed, weren't insured, and the horror stories we've heard of that, of people breaking things or, you know,
theft.
theft. We had a lot of theft that we knew about, people going in people's units to clean up drywall and things were missing. So it is very important. That is to pre-qualify whoever you use, the vendors or contractors. That's for sure.
Yeah. Next slide. Couple of things to use to pre-qualify your contractors. Obviously, the main thing, any particular layman will usually look for insurance coverage. So workers' compensation coverage in addition to liability insurance. So the important thing to note there is that liability, if somebody comes in to start removing debris or cut down trees around your business or around your residence, and they don't have liability insurance, and then that tree falls and now causes additional damage, I can guarantee you from working with insurance, they're in the business of saving money. If they're going to call what's called subrogation, and they're going to find fault with anybody else that potentially caused damage there. So if there's somebody else that impacted the damage that occurred, even though it was hit by a hurricane, they could be responsible for collateral damage that occurred from faulty workmanship. So making sure that they're covered by liability is important, and to make sure that that's periodically kept up to date and checked up on. Just because somebody gives you a certificate doesn't mean you shouldn't qualify that and make sure it's accurate and up to date. Licensed home improvement contractor, like I said, Florida is extremely stringent on licensing requirements. All of that is public information. So you can go online through the state of Florida and you can confirm the licensing information for any licensed contractor. So we recommend that you do that. Make sure whoever you do work with, whether it be a general contractor or a tradesman or a subcontractor, is providing written estimates and warranties, making sure they're providing current customer references, and make sure they're affiliated with leading accreditations, memberships, and certifications in the industry. If there's not, there's typically a reason why there's not, and it's probably that they're not investing in themselves or their trades. So, just like with any other business, contracting and construction, those things change all the time. Code requirements change all the time. Making sure somebody is keeping up to date with what the requirements are is extremely important. And making sure they're OSHA certified. Obviously, OSHA is safety requirements nationally, and then Hague certified, which Hague's a certification. It's extremely important for restoration work and additional training. So something else to look for. All right, next slide. All right, so we've talked a lot about photographic documentation. So we've got some examples here of what can be done pre-storm and post-storm. Obviously, with the advancements in technology, we've had a huge influx of opportunities for impressive videotape documentation. We've got high resolution, full scope, 4K, HD, 3D drone photos with mapping and Matterport. I think everybody's probably seen some drone footage, but it's really taken off in the field of general contracting and insurance. And we've got some videos here that show some of our recent drone footage of projects. The Matterport is something that you may not be as familiar with. And again, we've got some footage going of a Matterport. Keep in mind that it's a video clip of us using the program. So this is a very interactive, where you actually touch screen through the video screen to walk through the Matterport. It's done with a series of cameras, and it takes an actual, obviously, as you can see here, a real life view, and it creates a whole dollhouse effect of the entire structure, as well as internal footage that you can walk through and really get real-time documentation of what was going on in this particular structure prior to the storm, and then again compare it to what was going on in the structure after the storm. So this has been a very significant tool in the restoration industry that we can provide prior to and also following any type of traumatic event. So again, just a couple examples of where the technology is going with this.